Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Connected Communities EAP. Can I first thank the members of the committee for actually braving the elements this morning? Can I remind members, first of all, that this is being streamed, so when you're speaking, you need your microphones, otherwise the good people who are potentially watching us won't be able to hear you. And can I encourage you to have your phones either switched off or on silent, and if you turn your microphones off when you're not speaking, that would be great. Okay, without further ado, can I have apologies for absence, David?
Thank you very much, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Richard Lavelle and Valerie Anslow. You'll note that we've got Councillor Lynn Bucking with us today as substitute for Councillor Anslow. I've also received apologies from Adele Wiley and Janice Gotts. We've got Tom Barden in, substituting for Janice Gotts.
Thank you, David. Members, any declarations of interest? No, none at all. Okay, so can we move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2023? And is everybody happy for me to sign those as a true record of that meeting? I've got no dissenters. Oh, yep, okay, so I will sign those. Okay, moving on to item 4, which is developing a council's approach to communication, and I'll pass over to Guy Holloway to my right.
Chair, thank you very much, and good morning, councillors. I was going to run through a presentation this morning for a discussion topic on developing the council's approach to communications. What I'd like to do, Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd like to run through the slides. Got quite a few, but I was going to run through them with a bit of pace. If there's any that aren't clear, or any that you want to specifically understand in a bit more detail, happy to take questions at that point. But what I thought we'd do is if we do the discussion at the end, and what I have done at the end of the presentation, I have put some discussion items in there to help, just to help with the debate really, but I'm sure members will have their own comments and queries. So what I'll do, Chair, is I'll start off, and I think what I was going to cover in the presentation today was provide some context as to why I thought this item was useful to bring to the EAP, and really what the benefits are for considering it. Set out what we're trying to achieve as a council in terms of our approach to communications, and then provide some examples, because I think it's always useful to actually see some of the things that we're doing to help actually understand it, so it's not all about theory, it's actually about what's happening in practice. Then talk a little bit about developing our approach, and that's a bit that I'm really keen to get member input into, how we develop, how we move forwards. And then I was going to pose some discussion points as well there, Chair, which are just a guide. So that's what I'm looking to cover. So in terms of context, so why did we feel it was useful to bring this item along to this meeting? Well, we're actually developing and reviewing the council's approach to communication. So it's a really good point to actually get that kind of input from members in terms of how we move forwards. We're coming up to 3 years old as a unitary authority. We've had an approach in place. The first sort of 12 months of that was really about settling down, working out how we bring the resources together to communicate. Then we've done some development work, but we really want to take stock of where we are and work out how we go forwards. So we're developing a new communication strategy. So again, really good to bring members on board with just your feedback at this stage. Now, I'm very aware there'll be some things that we do well regarding communications. I've got some examples of some things that we think we do well, but also there'll be things that we can do better. Naturally, any organisation, there's room for improvement. So again, interested to get feedback from members on that. And I just thought this is a really good opportunity for member input, given where we are and what we're trying to achieve. And you must forgive me, I've got to might lose my voice at some point. Hopefully I won't. I think also contextually really important is what guides us as a council. It guides our approach to communication is the council's key commitments, its corporate priorities, its strategic priorities. So you can see there what I've done is I've picked out, this was set out in the council's corporate plan. It was adopted in December 2021, as you know, but it really sets out what the focus of the council is in terms of its service delivery and its enabling work with partners. And it follows that actually the communications activity of the council should really mirror and enforce that. And I've actually highlighted particularly the values of the council. So that thing about the council wanting to be customer focused, being respectful, efficient, supportive and trustworthy. they're all things that actually the way we communicate are really, really important in terms of enforcing those values and actually demonstrating them. To be trustworthy, actually, what we feel our residents and customers want is accurate information that's timely, that's honest, that's unbiased, and that is accessible to them. And that's some of the themes that runs through the way that we want to actually communicate as a council, because there's some core values we've got that underpin what we do. So that's just a reminder, really. So in terms of what we're trying to achieve through the way the council communicates, and as you see as I come onto this, it's a really broad area, so it's massive, but obviously we want to inform our residents, our customers and other stakeholders, informing them, making them aware of what services we provide, making them aware of what facilities there are in the local area. It's really, really important. If we've got some funding available for community organisations, naturally we want community organisations to know about that funding so they can access it. If we've got services available to help people in their homes to stay independent around aids and adaptations, again, knowing how they can access those services, fundamentally important. So actually informing our residents of what there is, but also explaining what services are available and how they can access them. And I think all of us would agree that if we started off with a complete blank sheet of paper and we were redesigning a local authority, we probably wouldn't end up in exactly the same situation as we are now, any council in the country, because they've been built up over years by many different legislative changes, by policy developments. So actually we've got quite a complex set of services to explain to our customers. And so it's really, really important that we can put that across in a way that makes it easy for them to understand and to access. I think also, and again, a point that's often quite contentious, is this need to engage with stakeholders in policy development and decision making. So when we're developing policy, to actually reach out and to talk to different stakeholders to get their input. And we've seen a lot of examples at Executive recently where the council's gone out, done a consultation, and then it's brought that consultation feedback back from different residents groups, from different tenants, from different stakeholders to actually inform policy decision making. And that again actually goes back to the principles of being customer focused, respectful, and also trust. It's really important that people have that stake in the services that are provided to them. I think, again, what we're trying to do is to get information out in a timely, relevant and accurate way. So, the example I give is if we make a mispayment on a batch of benefits payments, which is very rare, I hasten to add, it's something that can happen to any authority because it's very much based on systems and problems that we can have. What's really, really important is we let our customers know really, really quickly, and we let them know what we're doing, and we let them know how they can find out whereabouts they are, rather than actually taking a week to think about it, when actually the impact on the customer could be immediate. So that speed of response and making sure that we're giving relevant and accurate data is really, really important. I think another theme, and I think this is becoming much more prevalent and will be something that I will pose as a kind of an area for future development, is how can we help customers to help themselves? And I think that thing around, making information, as we've seen more and more information go on the website, on the internet, how can we actually allow customers to access services 24/7 rather than having to come into a customer services centre or to phone us up? I think those routes are still important, but actually being able to help customers, and particularly how can we use communications to target early interventions and to actually prevent issues from happening further down the line. A really good example of that would be something around issues around debt. And if we can help customers to help themselves in terms of accessing the advice they need, then actually that can help to stem off some bigger issues further down the line, which we pick up through housing services, through mental health and other areas. So it's really around how can communications be used to actually make people's lives better earlier. And then I think last on my list, but by no means least, is to attract the right attention to the area. And that might be the right attention from government in terms of funding schemes. It might be the attention of investors externally, people who are looking at where they want to put their car battery plant or their headquarters. We want to set out our case for why North Northamptonshire is a good base for that, because it also links into the rest of the council's corporate priorities around having better job opportunities, providing a better education, etc. So it's all linked together, but these are some of the things that we're trying to achieve through our approach for communication. There are some constraints in terms of, it all sounds really good, what I've just set out on that previous slide, But being realistic in life, actually trying to get messages across when we're communicating with our stakeholders, whether it's a housing tenant, whether it's a business, a government department, or a resident who might just use some of our services as hygiene factors in the background. There is this issue of time and information overload. I just know myself, I follow some social media feeds. Nowadays, we're bombarded with information. So much information out there. And I know that we put information out through a lot of channels, but we'll still hear people say, I didn't see it. I didn't see that. So how do we we're competing against a massive information? There are some things that we can do to help customers and help our residents, which I'll come on to, but that is a bit of an issue, and particularly when we bring in the digital divide, that actually some of the customers that we deal with will be extremely capable and competent in terms of the technology. Some of our younger customers will know a lot more about it than me in terms of some of the new social media channels, that's actually a challenge for us. How do we keep up with different audiences? However, there are other audiences who actually don't have a computer, who don't have internet access, and so therefore might not be able to actually receive some of the messages that we send out. So I think making sure that our approach doesn't just default to digital, that it sees digital as an important channel, but also realises that we've got people who are harder to reach, particularly through digital channels. There are cultural and language barriers as well, which we need to understand. There are lots of cases about how we might put a message out, but that can be misinterpreted by different audiences. So it's really making sure that we're understanding that. I think another problem, and we're seeing this globally more particularly over the last 2 years since the Ukraine conflict, I think is a good example in terms of just how social media and news channels are being used to peddle misinformation, and how it's very easy to misunderstand information. But that actually happens on all spheres. It happens in terms of all you need to do is to look through social media feeds relating to the council to see how you can get very different takes, and you can get misinformation put out around what's happening with different services. Complexity. I said around if we started with a blank sheet of paper, we probably wouldn't have started off designing public services the way they are. That complexity issue, I always, each year, describing that the council's funding streams, government formulas, through budget consultations actually is a real challenge to try and get customers to understand the detail about how a council receives its money. So we need to really put it forward in ways that are easy to understand, but still keeping that detail there for those people who do have a more detailed understanding. And then last, and again by no means least, limited resources. We've really got to look at the resources we've got as a council and say, how do we use those for maximum impact to get our message across? So I'm just going to take stock. Chair, is everything okay so far? There's no points you want me to major on? Thank you. I wanted to say a little bit now about our stakeholders. I've used words like customers, stakeholders. What I wanted to do is just sort of, this is not a complete list by any means, but I think it illustrates some of the complexity. So we've got, quite a lot of customers, quite a lot of residents that we want to communicate with. There are a lot of businesses. We've got housing tenants. There are 800 plus parish and town councillors. We've got elected members. We've got 3,200, circa 3,200 staff. The voluntary community sector. The list goes on. And when you think that each one of those groups might have different requirements around the messaging, the type of messaging, it actually is quite a complex process. So obviously one of the things we want to do is to make sure the information is available and understandable by as many of the audiences as possible, but also to look at how we target information. And it puts a smile on my face, Chair, because if I cast my mind back to when I started in local government, which I think from my recollection was about 25 years ago, things were probably a bit simpler at that stage. I was a bit disappointed I missed memorandum off here, but we had some letters, there was some face-to-face communication, there were telephone and media, and I remember email was really just taking traction. The first websites were just starting to come in, and they were no more than just a landing page saying, here's our phone number, ironically. But it was really, really early days. And I remember there being lots of debate around, is the internet actually going to change very much? And there were conferences being run on it. Some of you will no doubt remember them. But we had a message that we wanted to communicate to our target audience, and there were a small number of levers that you could use to get that message across. Interestingly, there was still a lot of work to do with those. But now when you look at it, if we've got a message as a council that we want to communicate to our different audiences, the way I see it, and the way I like to describe it, is we've got like a lens. We've got a lens that allows us to use different mechanisms to target different parts of our audience space. And you can see on here, we've still got the letters, the face-to-face telephone, but we've got web chat, we've got the internet, website, social media, there's still press and media, but that's changed quite a lot from being paper print to being digital. We've got adverts, billboards. There's loads of other assets. You'll see our refuse vehicles driving around with big banners on them. You can see adverts on roundabouts, but also artificial intelligence, which is something that's starting to be used more to actually help customers to get the information they need, which I'll come and say a little bit more about a bit later on. But the complexity of how we communicate with customers has ratcheted up. Now, in some ways, that's really beneficial. We've got more tools, and some of them are actually really cheap to access. And I will show you some of the way that we use social media and some of the traction we get from social media, which is really beneficial. But in other ways, it actually further dilutes the landscape, and for some customers makes it harder to keep up. What I would say, I've just added this bit at the bottom because some of our communication is direct, so we will communicate directly to our customer. A classic example of that would be someone applies for a planning application and we will write directly back to them and say, thank you, this is the process, some direct communication there. And we might put, we might drop a letter through someone's door. Some of that will be indirect, so putting an advert with a local newspaper, putting a social media advert out in some ways is indirect as well. And then some of that might be communication that we're putting out as a council, but also we can help put partner messages out. So we will help partners put their message out around things around health inequalities, how to access medical services, community voluntary sector services. Quite a big issue here is around this mix between planned and reactive communications. And I think what we're trying to do with our strategy going forwards is to be much more planned and proactive in our approach to communications. I think one of the things that we have, certainly in the first 12 months of the Unitary Authority, we were very reactive because there were a lot of issues that were coming up, particularly things around actually our customers and our partners understanding how services were operating and these differences in services that were provided by the previous district and borough councils, that you get some friction, some transaction costs. So a lot of our time was spent actually telling customers how they can access services, telling them why services are different. The next 12 months have allowed us to be much more proactive in terms of how we communicate, but where I would like to take the council going forwards, and I really appreciate a steer from members, is for us to get much more proactive and much more planned in our communication. Reactive elements will always be there. We'll always have issues that pop up that we need to react to, but be able to think ahead, to have more of a systematic programme of campaigns that we want to communicate with will actually help us as an organisation to deliver our priorities. Just some things at this stage that I feel, Chair, are important to remember, just some principles that I like the Council to keep in mind when we're communicating is, first of all, to be really sincere and be honest in how we communicate, and that goes back to the Council's values. The old adage, and it hasn't changed, communicate, communicate, communicate. I've already said we spend a lot of time putting messages out, but we'll still get customers say, I didn't hear that. So it's really around us not shying away from actually really pushing messages to get them out there. I think the other thing is we all have a role to play in communicating about the council. It's not a bolt-on function. Although we have got a corporate function, that's really around how do we actually ingrain our approach in the council. So one of the things I'd ask you to have a think about, if you don't mind, Chair, as we go through this presentation is what role do members have in how the council communicates, not just in developing our approach, but also in terms of how we communicate with our residents. And I'll come on to that as one of the questions at the end. But I think we've all got this requirement to actually help the council to get its message out. And I think that leads on to the fact that communication is two-way. One thing that I do get from members quite a lot actually is feedback from residents and from community organisations around what we're doing well, but also what we might need to do better. And I think we've got to remember I think everybody in this room does, but organisationally, that actually communication isn't just about us putting a message out. It's about us listening. It's a two-way process. So anything we can do to strengthen that approach clearly is really important. There were some really interesting, some of you may remember, there's some really interesting studies done. I think it was about 15 years ago. There were place surveys that were carried out. So local authorities at the time were required to undertake place surveys, and that would include questions around what residents' perception were of council services. So what do you think of your recycling services? What do you think of street cleaning? What do you think of your local swimming pool? But then it would ask a question, what do you think of your local council? And the Local Government Association, the LGA, did quite a lot of research bringing that information together and sort of looking and saying it was quite usual for residents to actually rate the services they receive more highly than the council that provides them as an institution. So I think that tells us something really quite interesting around actually someone might really rate the refuse collection they get or their local swimming pool. And we see that when we're making changes to services, don't we? Just how important it is to customers, and completely understandably. But also some of the anxieties and the feedback we get about the council as an organisation and agency. And I think the point I would make is when we're communicating, I think if we focus on getting the services right and we focus on getting the message out across the services and making sure that customers understand how they can access services and they can help to shape them, the reputation of the council follows. And I think that's really, really important. But we shouldn't shy away from actually reminding customers that it's the council that's providing those services and reminding them how we work. Being a local authority, obviously there are certain parameters around how we operate, which can be sometimes be quite difficult for customers to understand, and I get that. So I just wanted to make that point that reputation is really, really important, and our communications function is very much focused on that. But the focus is on getting the services right and making sure that actually reputation is built up from experience. And the reason why I mentioned that was there were quite a few examples of councils that were focusing on trying to get the reputation right, but perhaps weren't focusing on the service element of it. And you've got to do the other one first. You've got to focus on the services. And I think also that thing around having a learning and adaptive culture, which again, Chair, is one of the reasons why I thought this was a good item to bring to the EAP, because it can use members as a mirror as to our approach and to get some feedback. I want to go into some examples. First of all, that thing about reputation, it was really quite interesting going through the process actually, because obviously being a unitary authority and relatively young, coming up to our third birthday in the 1st of April, we didn't really have a corporate identity. I remember being on the panel as a member group, a sort of like a subsection of the shadow authority set up to actually look at the potential branding of the authority, and we looked at different logos. Some of you will remember we looked at different logos, and we did some work with residents to get feedback. But really what we've been doing for the last sort of 2.5 years is building that brand and making sure that customers understand that actually their old local authority doesn't exist anymore, and this is the new authority. So there's been a big piece of work around that, and I do now and then, I'll put my hands up, and I do now and then get emails saying we've still seen an old logo on a road sign in place X or on something here, and we're always keen to try and, in a cost-effective way, react to that and put that right. So there's still a piece of work around that. But I think we'd all agree that a lot of work's taken place to establish the brand, and I think it's really quite clear now when you see that logo who we are and what we do. I want to focus on press releases first because they're kind of the mainstay. They're the thing that most people think about when we think about a council or an organisation communicating. The way we use press releases is when we put the content together for the press release, we like to do that once but use it many times. So we use that information we put together for a press release for various updates that we put out, for tweets, for various updates we send. But they're really, really important because we've got a number of media organisations that automatically receive any press releases we produce. And we'll quite often see that the information that we put out is being covered either by the BBC, by radio, by news, by local media organisations. But also they do go out to partners, to members, to staff. So they're a really good way for getting information out. Here we've got, I've just kept a couple of examples in here, some of the parks that were awarded the coveted green flag, really nice story, some really nice parks we've got in the area. But also the preparations for the new Alfred Lord Tennyson School opening in September. And again, a lot of consultation that took place behind that illustrates the sort of the two-way approach that the council has to communication. Again, I always say, press releases are always nice when they're about people and when about people's stories. So we always like to try and get people in them where we can. But again, some of the things that the council have been doing recently to help quantify this. And what I would say, Chair, perhaps I should say this at the beginning, a copy of this presentation will be uploaded online. So on the EAP section. And what I'll do is if I look nicely at the committee administrator, David may be able to get that emailed out to members of this EAP afterwards as well. So thank you. David gave me the nod, so that's good. So don't worry about having to write all this detail down. You will get a copy of this. But what this graph shows is we've got a media system that we use, and what the media team will do is they'll log any of the conversations that they're having with members of the media, with the press. They'll log the press releases that we put out and also the press statements that we put out as well. And as you can see, just in terms of the conversations, pretty active. So in March, there were nearly 70 conversations taking place with members of the media. And what often happens is we'll get engagements with the media who want to understand an issue. They'll ask questions. They want to understand, is this a story or not? So we'll have a dialogue with them. So it isn't just a case, and I think the point I wanted to point out, isn't just a case that we put together a press release and throw it out and the press pick it up. They'll want to understand that particular issue, but also there's a lot of things they'll ask us which we haven't put a press release out, and we might take the view that we need to put a statement out to clarify it, or we might just put the media in the loop with what's happening. So there's a lot of dialogue that takes place, and I think the thing I would say is that the media are a really important function for helping to get the council's message out, whether it's radio, whether it's TV, whether it's a small local organisation or a larger organisation. They've all got a role to play, and it can be really beneficial. I know that could be a point that we could be discussing, but I think what I'm trying to say is that media has a really important role in helping the council to get its message out to its customers, and also getting the message back. The council's website, I mentioned towards the start of the presentation that if I roll the clock back 25 years, actually councils didn't have websites, did they? And now actually our customers can do a lot of their business with us 24/7, which is obviously very beneficial, but also they can give feedback to us 24/7 as well, which can present some challenges because some parts of us do operate 24/7, but if we get a query in at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're not always going to be well placed to be able to respond to it. But we do have the facility to look at priority issues that come in. What I did want to do, this one thing I was going to highlight, is if you're a town and parish council or if you're another customer group, you can sign up for updates. So if you want to specifically get information on a particular issue, our modern.gov platform, if we've got customers who want to find out or want to keep in touch with the reports that are going out, they can sign up to the modern.gov platform to get information. Things like the leaders update, also signing up to social media. So we can give customers a choice to a certain degree, and we want to develop that approach going forwards. In terms of the website, just wanted to highlight, if we go back to June 2021, so the new unitary authority was in its infancy, we were ranked 199th out of, I think it's about 350 local authority and public sector organisations. There's an organisation that does international web comparisons called Silktide, and they will look at websites and they'll look at how accessible they are, how easy it is to get information, and they will rank organisations, and we were ranked 199th out of 350. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't think, when I looked at the legacy district and boroughs, there was a lot of variety in how the information was put across, and a lot of variety in terms of the quality of the information. And what we've been working really hard to do in the new unitary authority is to try and get that website right in terms of the level of information, in terms of the consistency. We've still got more work to do on that, but what I would say is, and Silktide is just one factor that you can use to judge success, but it is well recognised not only by the industry but also by the Cabinet Office and the government. So it's an important metric. But since we've been developing, we've consistently been in the top 10 in terms of the ranking of local authorities. We did actually reach, I think it was a joint first at one point. We're currently 9th in terms of our ranking. What we're not doing is we're not chasing trying to be in first place, but what we are doing is we want to make sure that the information we're putting on our website is accessible, that it's understandable, that it's easy for customers to understand, to access, and to actually engage in services with us. So we've made some good progress on that. Just to give you a bit of an example, I don't want to drift too far, Chair, from the thing about communication, but I think what it does illustrate is how important the website is and how important digital channels are. We had just over 100,000 forms submitted for both quarter 1 and 2, so that's for a 6-month period in 2023-24. So clearly a lot of customers submitting forms. When you submit a form, that's usually a request for a service. So, we've got a lot of requests coming that way. We had 1.6 million sessions, so individual uses of the website in that same period. So again, quite significant numbers, and getting that website right, setting our stall out really, really clearly, actually reduces the requirement for customers to have to pick up the phone or to email in. So we want to get that right as much as possible. I want to say a little bit about social media. What I'll do, Chair, I'll just check in at this stage. Members happy for me to continue? I know there's a lot of information here, so I do apologise, but I'm just going to keep putting it out there unless you ask me to stop or slow down. Social media, again, sorry, it's a bit of a statistics fest again, I'm afraid. Again, we started off afresh with our social media channels, so we've really been trying to build those up as a new unitary authority, and at the moment, we've got nearly 12,000 people will receive our Facebook posts when we put them out. Now, if you look at 350,000 people living locally, you might think that's a small percentage, but if we then say that if those people share or reshare or they comment, that can propagate quite significantly. So since April 2021, we've posted just over 5,000 updates on Facebook. We've had 11 million unique users have seen the posts. Over 120,000 people have engaged with us, and 390,000 URL clicks. So what that means is that people have clicked on, they've selected in that post to go to a website or go and get more information. And I think what this does, I'm sure if we compared this to some more established authorities, these figures would be lower. It's one of the reasons why what we want to do is to really give this a push going forwards, but not to alienate those people who won't be on the platforms, but to push it further forward. And I think there is a question around we perhaps could do more as authority to say this is what this is how you can find out more information, and for people to follow us, and more we could do to actually help customers to onboard. If we look at Twitter, it's X now, but formerly known as Twitter. I wonder how long that will continue. It's a lesson in branding, Chair. I think it will be some time. But again, we've got just under 4,500 people follow us on Twitter. That is quite low when you look at other organisations. But again, when you look at how it's been growing, the trajectory, the line is upwards. And again, we want to look at ways that we can increase that. But we've sent out nearly 6,000 tweets, 4 million unique users have seen our posts, over 100,000 people engaged. So again, what this illustrates is just how useful these are. Now, the next stage, the next slide, Chair, I'll apologise for now. I'm really not proposing you to analyse it in the meeting. It's one of those sort of takeaway things where, after the meeting, if you want to look and sort of see over the last calendar year, just kind of how those stats break down. There's some information in there, and I think they're quite interesting, actually. So I'm not going to go into detail on them now, but there's something that members, and indeed anyone of you who's interested in this, can look and see how we're using this data. Just some points, actually, just some things I'd flag up for members, if I may. So, please do join Facebook and social media. Some of you will be. I know it can be a bit daunting as well, but what we're really keen to do is to get members signed up to the social media channel of their choice, but to help get the message out. Again, it's your choice, but it really can help to get that message out in communities, and it gives you that kind of ability to get your message out to people who are following you. It's personal choice, so I'm just putting it out there as an idea. But if you are on social media, please do like and reshare posts, because that does help to get the message out. And it can also help. Today's a really good example. Absolutely pouring down with rain. We'll be putting messaging out around just sort of weather warnings and those type of things. You know, it can help to get messaging out around other important bits of information. And asking people to follow us, you know, it could be a good way of someone finding out about grant funding really, really quickly, or for finding out about a consultation. So that's kind of like an advert, so I apologise. Again, some of the stuff we do to routinely get information out, we've got a leaders update that goes out every 2 weeks. That pulls on a range of information. The leader puts some information in there, you know, reflecting the things that are important, but we use a lot of the press releases as well to go out there. We've got website news on the council's website, as I say, social media, and people can sign up for updates. There's actually quite a lot of avenues that if you want to find out about the council services, you can. Another issue that I know will have sparked some debate over the last 2.5 years, we have put a new phone system in. And you know, communications, it's that thing, isn't it? If a customer wants to talk to us, we want them to walk in and have that face-to-face conversation. We want them to be able to go online, but also we want them to be able to get through on the phone. And it has been a challenge up until recently because we have had 5 different phone systems. Now we've got one phone system in place. We're at the process where it's almost implemented across the whole council. We've just got one area to complete. And then it's about how we use that to make it much easier for a customer services agent to be able to put the customer in touch with someone in the back office. So we're making good progress on that. But it's still very much work in progress, but we're moving in the right direction. What I wanted to do, Chair, is some of the things I've talked about at the moment have been quite mechanical. And communication, I went back to what I was saying about the reputation of the council. And actually, communications is quite emotive. It operates at an emotive level. There's lots of research around how marketing and advertising operates. One of the things we've been really keen to do as a council is to support our local high streets. Because if we go back to our local priorities and strategic aims at the beginning, you know, actually, if we've got high streets that are thriving, that are doing well, you know, it's good for business, it's good for local employment, it's good for mental health, it's good for just the feel-good factor. And, you know, we want high streets to be vibrant. So one of the things we've been doing to support, and there's a whole number of measures, but from a communications angle, is one of the things that we will do is to actually support local high streets with campaigns. So, you know, we've been doing a lot of work with shops locally to help to sort of promote things that they're doing. This is just some, I'm not going to go into all the stats here. This is some, you can look at this at your leisure after the meeting, but some social media stats that relate to the campaign we've done. The bit that was more important to me, which I think is more relevant actually, is what the businesses say about the campaign that's been run. And what I would say is this isn't the council, you know, marching and saying, oh, look what we can do for you. This actually is a partnership between the council, between the local businesses, but also our funders, you know, the government making funding available for us to actually come up with a campaign that helps to drive more footfall into local areas. And what we have seen, I think this has been really encouraging, because let's face it, it is challenging times economically for high streets, as it is for everybody. But what we've seen is actually some really positive feedback from local businesses to get a kind of a positive buzz and to get more people in. And what we're seeing is actually the campaign is having an impact. And we've got a lot more stats that we measure around, you know, this is the money we put into a campaign, this is the activity we do, and this is the kind of the results of that and the benefits. So we do that behind the scenes. But again, it's just an example of how we've got campaigns. And one of the things that we want to do moving forwards, and I mentioned about being more proactive in our approaches, we do want to have more campaigns in place, and we do want to have an annual programme that says these are the campaigns that are coming up. Members will be able to see what's coming up. Businesses will be public. And those campaigns might be about, you know, some of the other things that we run might be about health prevention measures. They might be about, you know, employability, about a career in care. They're not all about, you know, the town centre, but it's just to give you an example of some of the things that we're doing. Chair, first rule of advertising, never miss an opportunity to sell. And I just wanted to say, coming up, we do have a Christmas campaign that we'll be implementing where we're getting a lot of businesses involved, so 14 towns locally, 56 local businesses, lots of advertising and some prize vouchers and things. So that's really quite exciting. So we've got a campaign coming up, again, to help support town centres in the area. But one of the other areas, this keen to point out, this isn't just about the council. I mentioned earlier about partner organisations, around other stakeholders. The Big 50 piece of work that we're doing really is sort of getting us to think about taking a step back. So we've got those strategic priorities as a council that we're keen to communicate about. But actually, how can we, alongside big and small businesses, amongst voluntary and community sector organisations, against our health partners, the police, education, how can we start to think about what are some of the issues that we want to collectively be communicating to really hit to the root cause of some of the issues? So really good piece of work that Robin Webber-Jones has been doing for the Bedford College group at Tresham is sort of leading on a piece of work around skills, and just skills being one of the sort of the areas that actually is quite fundamental. We need the right skills in place to ensure that businesses have got the right skill sets going forward. And communication is really, really important, because we want people to know what skills we're on offer here. We want investment to come into those skills. We want to connect with businesses, but also we want people with skill sets to come to North Northamptonshire and to stay in North Northamptonshire and not travel out and go perhaps to other areas. So communications will play a really important role with that, but it's not just about the council, it's about working with our partners. I mentioned about communication being two-way. We have recently launched a revamp of our consultation and engagement website, so Your Voice Matters. We're really keen to give that a push moving forwards to make sure that we're engaging with as many stakeholder groups as possible around just some of the things that the council's doing. We do also put information on there for other organisations, depending on what they are, but it's mainly council policy that we're looking at. And you can go on there and you can get a range. You can take part in a range of consultations. And one of the things, the challenges is, how do we get the message out about these more widely across our communities? One of the things I'm really keen to do is there will be people sitting in rural areas who may not follow Twitter or be on the internet. They might not see some of the information we put out. How do we get through their door information in a timely way that allows them to find out? So how do we work with parish and town councils, and where there are parish and town newsletters, how do we get information out through there? So it's not all about technology. It's really some of the sort of the base level stuff that we want to work on. So in terms of our future focus, nearly at the end now, Chair, because I know members will be keen to engage in a dialogue on this, but what we want to do is to do more planned activity, be more proactive in our approach moving forwards, to be targeted and prioritised in that approach, because resources are limited and we are competing with a lot of information. So the more targeted we can be, the better. Look at an annual programme of key campaigns so that we can see what's coming up. That will allow members the opportunity to find out more about what's happening going forwards, but also just give us more time to plan and get our activity aligned. We want to focus on things like demand management. So what I mean by that is there's things that we can be doing. So we've got budget challenges as an authority, as councils have across the country. There are things that we can do to actually reduce the demand from services by helping our customers to help themselves. So that kind of preventative work, it will be a really important focus going forwards, that prevention and early intervention. But also remembering that we want to be efficient, economic and effective. And how we communicate is really, really important, because our customers will form their opinion about how we do things, which we all know really well. So having a clear strategy that is supported by the right policies and procedures. So we want to have a review of what we've got in place and look to develop those. We want to standardise our approach and make it simple. At the moment, we do have a corporate comms team, and we're proposing we continue with that approach. But what we do want to do is to look at how we develop capacity in service areas, not by increasing resources, but by just making sure that staff are they've got better access to skills, expertise, to advice, to templates, and perhaps have service champions, which is something I've used before in the previous authority, which can work really, really well. We want to make sure that we make efficient and effective use of traditional methods of communication, which will still be really important moving forwards, but also look at how we make more effective use of digital channels and technology. Chair, on this point, I'm going to put something up now. I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to manage expectations on this, because I wanted to qualify what I'm going to put up on the screen. I came along and I did a presentation on artificial intelligence at a recent EAP, which I thought was a really useful debate and discussion. And one of the points I made in there is that we wanted to be really cautious about how we move forwards. And I think as an authority we will be. But what I wanted to illustrate to you is just how technology can potentially be used in organisations going forward. I'm not suggesting what I'm about to put up on the screen for 1 minute. I know, I talk to other organisations, and I know there are some organisations who've said, do you know what, we're going to get artificial intelligence to start doing our communications for us. That would be lots of issues with a local authority in a public sector organisation. But what I wanted to do is just to show you the power of artificial intelligence with a demonstration, just to get you thinking, because there are some ways that we can use it. When you look at the website, you know, it might be if we have web chat or chatbot, they can get much better at answering customer queries. Not saying we should do that, but I think we'll see this technology start to be mainstreamed more. And if I go back to what I was saying 25 years ago, there wasn't a website. What are things going to look like in 5, 10, 25 years' time? So this next example was a bit of fun, and I wanted to share it with you. Hopefully it will work on screen, but some of you will be familiar. There are other AI models out there, by the way. This is ChatGPT, but there are other AI systems out there. And I thought I'd ask it to write a press release for me. This was completely random, so I just thought, well, we've got Christmas coming up. So, and you'll see how slow I type on my iPad, so I apologise about that now. But you can see in the bottom of the screen, it'll probably be quite small, I'm afraid. So here we go. So, and for those of you who haven't got the best eyesight like myself, I will read out what I'm typing in there. So write me a press release for, I told you I was slow, a town's Christmas lights. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Switch on in the UK. I put that because obviously we've got, it could pull up from examples from other countries. You know, within a split second, here we go, this is what it gives back. And, you know, I'll share this with you separately, but you can see it's actually really well written. We wouldn't use this press release, by the way. It's not in the same language we'd use, but it shows you the power, and it shows you why, you know, there's a problem that people are using it to write essays and everything else. I think the reason why I wanted to illustrate this is it shows how AI will be used going forward. It's not showing how we're going to use it necessarily, but it does show you just how clever it is getting, and there's a lot of debate out there. And I just wanted to put it up as to provoke a bit of thought, but I'll qualify that. We're not, you know, we've got officers with a lot of experience who understand the emotive nuances of press issues. They understand the political elements of it. There's so many dimensions, so many layers. But as a tool to help with some routine things, you can see how it could become part of the repertoire of tools that people would use. And I know now when we talk to software vendors, they've often got their AI elements to it that will do quite clever things. So I don't want to go off the beaten track, but there are things that they can do around, so consultation engagement. We've got people who read the reports, put everything together. AI can do a lot of that analysis for us. As to whether we would use it or not is a separate thing. But I kind of wanted to flag it up as a look at how powerful it is. And it's quite scary how it can work. So some discussion points, Chair, and then I'll stop and hand over to members. So what would you like to see the Council's communication strategy achieve? It's just a question, just to help provoke some thought. How do we make communications more inclusive? Something that's really, really important. We've got to be really, really mindful of the fact that we want to reach out to as many people as we can, to everybody. What can elected members do to help improve communications? How can we better use technology to communicate? What campaigns do you feel we need to focus on? And do you have any other thoughts? A lot of questions there, Chair. I'm not suggesting that you're going to go through all of these in detail, and I'll happily take any feedback after the EAP, but just to sort of like some points to start the debate. And at that point, I'm going to be quiet now, and I'll let members have a discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Guy. That was very extensive. Perhaps we're all now getting on our computers and going to ChatGPT to ask you questions back.
Oh, no.
Members, anybody want to start off? Yeah, okay, Bert. Sorry, Councillor Jackson.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. One of the campaigns, you say, what do we need to focus on? We find one of the biggest problems as a town council, you find that a lot of the ratepayers do not seem to understand that North Northants are responsible for certain services and obviously town councils are responsible for others. I think we need somehow to get to, most of the people do, but there are obviously some people that don't have IT, etc. And they are determined to inundate town councils with requests for certain which items that they're not able to do because it's the responsibility of North South. I think somehow we need to get all this information out to everybody.
Yeah, I think that was a conversation that some of the clerks had with the clerks of the town and parish councils had with the senior officers of NNC a couple of weeks back. So yeah, it is a problem because if people can't get through to the NNC telephone system, they're inclined to go for numbers that they've got and think that they can get through via another door, and it's a different organisation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think there's a lot there to think about. Really good presentation there. I thought, you know, it is food for thought. When we talk about AI, I was at the NCALC AGM week last Saturday, and they are bigging this up for town and parish councils to use it. You know, it's a real good tool. I think you've got to be careful because it's obviously very new, and you need to understand how you can use it to your benefit. But talking about communication, I think there's a couple of things that still I find is a problem that, you know, we have an ageing population and not everybody has access to the internet or computers. And I think, you know, if we're not careful, these people, they just sit back and say, I can't do it, I don't know how to do it, so they leave it. So, you know, they become part of a forgotten community if you're not careful. So I think it's about how do you communicate to everybody, all 357,000 people. That's what you've got to do. I think with the telephones, I know the telephones have been quite a problem. And there's still a lot of people who say, well, can't I pick up the phone and speak to somebody? Instead of saying, if you want this, push 1, if you want that, push 2. So I think there's an area there that we perhaps need to investigate because, you know, there's a lot of people who, they pick up the phone, hear that, and put the phone back down again. And it's about how people communicate with who they want to communicate. A simpler way of saying, I want housing, so I ring that number. I want so-and-so, I ring that number. So, but yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot to think about for the future. But really good presentation, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Sorry, Councillor Buckingham. You're on the wrong side.
You're not looking this way. Fair enough. Thank you. Yes, good presentation. Yes, you've still got a way to go, especially with our website, because you still can't search it properly. And it's the accessibility for me. In terms of what can elected members do to improve communications, I'm a keyboard warrior, so I sit there on social media. I share a lot of stuff that comes out. So this week I've shared stuff about rural grants that have just come out to some of the villages because I've got all those networks set up. I've put out stuff about the Household Support Fund, which is just coming on. So what I do is I am part of the council's social media, Facebook. Anything that comes to me, I share on my networks to get the widest. But I'm also there so that if somebody says, oh yeah, here we go again, it's the council. So for an example, there was a discussion around the closing off of George Street again this week. which I shared, and everybody said, well, they haven't asked us, they haven't consulted us, and was actually able to share that there was a consultation out. I'm part of your consultation network, but I don't get anything back from there. So I have to go on periodically. So it's making sure those links are there, that if you are sign up to something, you get information back. I still share to Instagram, not so much Twitter or X as it's now known, but see ourselves as ambassadors for the council. And it's a thing that we've been doing for many years in other spheres in terms of the voluntary community sector. So if we want something, we have an amount of ambassadors who, when they get something, will share it on their networks too, because it's that whole thing about pushing down a domino and gathering momentum, but also being there to dispel some of the fears that people have as well, because, you know, people don't know and understand. Take an example this week that we know that there's been changes in housing officers for tenants, but nobody knows who their housing officer is because that information hasn't gone out. So we're getting more and more things coming in from tenants saying, well, I've been trying to get hold of my housing officer, but I haven't been able to. I've come into the queue, I've asked. I've been given phone numbers, but I still don't know who my housing officer is. So it's making sure things are done in a timely fashion as well, because the easier it becomes to communicate. And I know you said that the telephony system, there's only one part. Which part are we still to implement on the telephony system, please?
Chair, are you happy for me to take that? No, it's a really good question. So I'm just going to move my microphone so I can face you when I'm talking, Councillor. Apologies. So the telephone system, basically, we've got sort of 5 elements to it. The legacy district and boroughs, and then the legacy NCC element of it, the county council element of it, because we've got staff who are served by different IT domains. So the bit we've still got to do is those staff who are using the county council, effectively the old county council's telephone system, which is provided by West Northamptonshire Council. So that, from memory, is due to be migrated in December. And then what we'll do is basically any member of staff employed by North Northamptonshire Council who has a telephone, you know, has a, not everybody does have a telephone, but those who do are on the Northamptonshire Council telephone system. And I think you raise a really good point, actually, because what that doesn't then mean is that all of the problems with communicating by telephone is solved. What it means is we're then in a much better position to be able to solve the issues that we've got, because things like we've got to make sure that staff understand how they can use the address books. We get a lot of data back from telephone systems. So what it will do is it's already telling us where we're getting much more accurate and insightful information around customer services calls, the volume of those calls, when they're coming in, whether we're able to pass them on to someone. And that, and without going too much on a tangent, but I think it is relevant, Chair, if I may, that information, when put alongside some of the information we get from our customer relationship management system, which tells us why people are phoning, actually allows us to start making some resource decisions around, you know, where do we need people to be able to answer phone calls at what times. When we put a letter out or an email out to someone, to 10,000 people, you know, if they're all going to phone us at once, actually is it better to sort of drip feed those out over a couple of days, and just to get a little bit smarter in how we operate and to avoid that situation where everyone's trying to phone us all at once, or indeed, as you say there, someone's trying to get hold of a housing officer and the person in customer services might not know who they've got to get hold of. So it's getting much smarter, but it's the start of the process. The start is to get the infrastructure right, and it's how we use that. So we've still got more work to do.
you want to come back?
I'd love to come back, thank you. And the other problem that we have, especially around the repairs and maintenance section for tenants, is that we're told that the repairs section have tried to get hold of a tenant but have the wrong number or don't have the right email address. So it's keeping up some of those, you know, and it could be not just about tenants, but, you know, people move on from jobs. So it's that whole churn of keeping up with who's doing what, when, where. It's an age-old problem that, you know, people do move on. People do, you know, sort of. So it's just keeping up with those things. It's a two-way conversation. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think people think that putting a new telephone system in will be the absolute answer to everything, and it isn't. What it needs is the customer relation management system which runs alongside it, and making sure that that customer relationship management system actually has the right information and is accessible to everybody. If in the past customer services, they might make a note of somebody's telephone number, but if it just stays there, but somebody else is actually answering the query, you've got a problem. Now the way the CRM system will work is that everybody will have access to it who needs to have access to it. And I say everybody who needs to have access before anybody jumps down my throat about GDPR. But it should make the whole thing. But a telephone system on its own won't sort the problem. A CRM system on its own won't sort the problem. But a corporate-wide CRM and telephone system should go a long way. Councillor Brackenbury.
I will just briefly mention telephones. I know we've probably spoken more widely about that, but that is something where I get complaints from, and I think some of it is expectation as well, because members of the public and town and parish councils have been used to picking up the phone, talking to a small district council, which actually is much different. We are a much larger organisation. So, but I think it is important that there are contact numbers that people can have, but I'll leave it that there. You did mention AI, and I think we do have to be careful with that, because I think it's really important that any messages that get out sound like the council, the identity or the person. I think there's nothing worse than reading a press release and you think that person didn't write that, doesn't sound a bit like them. So I think it's really important that the identity is kept. And again, social media, I think, and the amount of communication we do. You did mention it, Guy, about noise. I think there can be, because different people will be interested in different subjects. And just for example, I've had an email this week. Something went out on social media from the council. They picked up on that straight away and have said something else that went out, I know, a few times, more than a few times, wasn't communicated. So sometimes it's what people are looking for rather than what we actually get out there. So I think, and I think you do have to be careful with social media. I'm very happy to we communicate with the town and parish councils, but if you've got a public social media account as a councillor, there is sometimes a lot of misinformation that goes on social media, and unless you're prepared to be sat there day in, day out, correcting that, I don't know how you... I'm very happy to answer emails, phone calls, letters, whatever, but I just think social media can become a bit of a minefield.
I may be making a rod for my own back here, but can I say, if there are issues with the telephone system, rather than people just speaking to members and complaining about it, I would like to know about it as portfolio holder, and a little bit more information than, oh, somebody phoned the number and nothing happened. What I'd like to have is some information on telephone number that they were calling from and the time, and what we'll try to do, we'll try to track it back through the system and just identify what the problem is. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people criticise our customer service department, and the call comes in, the call is fielded by our customer service department, but it then potentially goes off to another department, and it's that other department, and you know, we've all seen was it a Heineken advert, the complaints department that had a phone in it that nobody was actually sitting at the phone, and he just rang and rang and rang. And we need to identify where those phones are and make sure that they are being directed and working properly. Councillor Brackenbury, you're waving.
Yeah, if I could just come back on that. I think some of it is going back to the expectation as well that I said earlier, because town and parish councils knew who they went to at the districts. They'd ring up customer service or they'd have a number. And I think, obviously, now we're a much larger organisation. They may have to wait a bit longer, and it's that as well. So, but you have explained well about the telephone.
Yeah, I think what I'd also say is, and I do get it, and I listened to the complaints early on that town and parish clerks knew who that they used to phone up and they used to have a chat to somebody about how their kids are at school and everything else. Our customer service department are fielding somewhere around about 50,000 inquiries a month, and my KPIs bod here is nodding nicely at me, so I know I'm not far out with the figures. But we have those figures. Sorry, Tom, I shouldn't call you bod. But 50,000 calls. We are just such a big organisation now that unfortunately people can't just phone up to chat about the weather. Councillor Jelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, I think on a couple of occasions when I've rung the council and I couldn't get through, I've been offered the callback service. Now, that's worked quite well. Might not have been the same day, but the following morning you get a call back from somebody to say, you rang up, what's your concern? So I think that's a bonus. That works if we can get that working across the whole system. The other thing I was going to say about communications again is, in the whole of Northamptonshire, you've got I suppose it's a network of communication people, which is your town and parish councils. So if we could have a system where all of the primary information, really important information, is sent out to the town and parish councils as it happens, we can communicate that locally. I mean, where I am in Rothwell, we have a quarterly newsletter. We put no end of information into that, and we have it delivered to every household in the town. So we can put loads of information in that, telephone numbers, consultations, whatever. There's lots of things. So they're out there. We're all elected members, and we're all ready to communicate it out. So if we can have a far better communication system to the town and parish councils, I think that would be a benefit for North Wales Downs Council.
Yeah, thank you. That's what Guy, did you want to come back? Yeah.
Sorry, perhaps I'll sweep them up at the end if it helps.
Okay, Councillor Buckingham.
Okay. The next part is you've got some campaigns going on, especially around Christmas. The High campaign, I know that as a town council, Corby did something like have a restaurant week where they got local restaurants involved and they gave, discounts on the thing. So I think it's important that town and parish councils also talk to you and know that they can talk to you so that they can coordinate things a little bit better. Because as you say, it's a two-way street. So if you know that, say, Corby Borough Council is going to do something, not borough councils, sorry, that mentality, Corby Town Council is going to do something like the restaurant week, you can feed into that in some way. And the same for the other towns and sort of villages. Just a suggestion.
Chair, if I may, I mean, and thank you for all the feedback. I think there's a sort of like a common theme on Councillor Jelly and Councillor Buckingham's responses or points there around strengthening the relationship between town and parish councils. It's interesting, you referenced the conference. There was an NCALC conference, wasn't there? I think it was last Saturday, and I know my colleague George Candler attended that, and I think part of it was around how we develop our approach with town and parish councils. And I think we're really, really keen to do that, because you know, the ways we can help each other, but also it really does allow us to reach out to those town and rural communities. And let's face it, and I think it's the point that Councillor Brackenbury's making, that you know, we have gone through a major reset of the structure of local government, and so that relationship has changed between town and parish councils and between residents, not necessarily for a bad way, but it's changed. And when you get change, you need to put effort into servicing it and moving forward to making sure that we're taking everybody with us. And we're very conscious of that. But on the town and parish council front, what we want to do is to get better at getting information out, and more relevant information out to town and parish councils. We do put information out to the clerks, but what we want to do is for actually parish councils themselves to sign up for receiving information. So we're going to do a piece of work around that, but making sure we've got the clerks and the chairs with us. Some other really good points that came out of this, if you don't mind, Chair, because Councillor Jelly had sort of posed the question, which I think is right. It's probably rhetorical, but also it is a real question around how do we get around this digital divide where we've got residents who won't have access to technology. And I think as a council, you know, we have got a role to play, not only in putting information out to them in a way that's more accessible, but also to try and help people get to help to rebalance that digital divide. One of the things we did an older persons fair last year. We had really good take up. A lot of people came, really liked it. We had an officer there to actually run through with a computer to show residents how easy it is when you've got it, and to actually provide some training. You know, we put information out to people around adult learning. And I know my father's in his 80s, and he was determined to some pain to myself, I hasten to add, but he wanted to get himself up to speed with computers, and I got a lot of questions, but he enrolled. I think my lack of accessibility, he enrolled in a program, got himself up to speed with it, and you know, now there's no stopping him. So I think there are services and things out there, but it still won't be for everybody. But I think we do have to tackle that and to help people get up to speed. You know, using our libraries to provide sort of training. We've got our housing services, we used to run a sort of a silver surfers program to get people up to speed with it. But you know, different initiatives. But I think it's really still remembering there might be some people at the end of that who don't access it. And Councillor Buckingham, I mean, thank you for your points around social media. I mean, it sounds really, really impressive. What I do actually understand though is it really is very different. I don't really use social media myself much. I just tend to monitor things on it, but I don't really put stuff on it because I just don't. But I do read stuff and keep myself up to speed. So there are different ways we can use it, but I absolutely understand it really does. It's really about what your lifestyle is and what your preferences are. So I wouldn't want us to try and one size fits all. But some really good feedback there. I think the other point I would say though, which I thought was really useful, if I may, Chair, is Councillor Buckingham, you mentioned there around the experience of housing repairs, etc. And I think that again, you know, we've got loads of examples in our lives outside of local government where, you know, if I order a package, I'm always reassured and amazed by how accurately it can tell me exactly where that package is. And we want to learn from that, and we want to get better as a local authority. And if someone's booking a repair, we want to be able to tell them what's happening. We'd love to be able to say your engineer is this far away and they'll be on site soon and you can reschedule, or a message go out to say, sorry, there's been a delay, they'll come later. And we've got to look at the whole systems that support that. But I think that's the direction we want to go in. And you're absolutely right. The customer, doesn't matter what information we put out, the customer will judge us by their experience of that service. And so we have to get that right. And communications plays a role in it, but it's all of the things that underpin that as well. So I'm glad you've raised that, because it to sort of show the scale of what we've got to do, but we're really keen to tackle that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bucking?
One last point. A suggestion is in getting information out to members and town and parish councils is that we have almost like an intranet where we can get information from to signpost people on. You talk about people helping themselves. And I think that if we as members can be able to signpost, so I know where to send somebody who's having problems with debt recovery or some other things that most people don't know. So if we had something like an intranet where we could find out the information if we want, which wouldn't necessarily be the information that you put on an ordinary website, but just that thing which would have the ability to sort of, because our website I don't think has the ability to automatically translate or accessibility in raising font sizes or things like that. So we can also help people to help themselves, if that makes sense.
Chair, it does. Thank you. I mean, look, I'll certainly take it away and think about it. I'm not saying no or yes to anything. But what I will do is I will definitely consider it. I think what we're trying to do is to get all the information we need in one place, like the website, and to do it once. But your point is really good, and what I really like is this concept of actually there might be some web addresses or some areas of the website that are particularly helpful that we can pull out and say, well, look, actually, these are areas that we think might be really, really useful to you. And also keen to get feedback as well outside of this meeting as areas that you might want to signpost people to. Because the real trick here is if we can get the information right on the intranet to all audiences, but we can make it easy to find. If you've got the links to that, or you know where to go, when someone comes in and says, hi, I've got an issue with debt or with housing or whatever, we can help members to signpost people to that right information. And often it's about how we put information, and I do realise this is something that is important. It's how we put information alongside each other. What we do try and do is when we put the information on the internet, we do try and think about some of the problems that might be linked, so that we make it easy for people to find information that might be related to that. And we also look at the sort of the customer journey. We don't look at it per individual. There's no identifying information on there, but what we would know is that someone may have looked at one piece of information and then gone to something else, to allow us to sort of build up an understanding as to where people are going on the website and where are the linkages between the information. I think we do have more work to do on that. I think you're right to raise it, and I'll certainly pick up this thing around how can we get better at sending information out to members, to sort of say, this is where you can find X, Y, and Z. And I'll give the other point some thought around, I'm always dubious about creating new intranets and websites because they need to be administered, there's costs, and if it's public facing, it's got to meet the same accessibility standards. But I think the point and the problem that we're trying to solve, I think, is a good one, and we need to look at that.
Yeah, I noted down quite early on, I put down ageing social media pages, and that wasn't talking about social media pages for ageing people. It's a case that as social media evolves and goes further and further, you suddenly discover that you've got social media sites that are redundant, that's got old information on, and that old information does not do us any good at all, or does anybody any good at all. I think we're also got to be alive with what we're doing. As Guy said, he came into local politics, or local government, sorry, not local politics, 25 years ago. I became a councillor over 20 years ago now, and the whole media concept has completely changed in that time. And I think we've got to be aware that people have inadvertently got themselves hidden from news and information because they, the Evening Telegraph was the paper that everybody read 20 years ago. Now, I'd be very surprised if anybody around this table actually read it very often. So, you know, things change. Also, I can't remember who mentioned website searches. I think it was yourself, Councillor Buckingham. We're well aware that the web search is not the best in the world, and I think that's because it's reactive rather than proactive, and that's something that we've been discussing. And now that we have our own digital platform ourselves as Northants, that will change going forward. Councillors, anything else that you want to say before we close this part of the meeting and move on? No? Okay. So in that case, I nearly called you Councillor Pope. David.
That was a while ago.
Would you like to talk to us about the forward plan?
I will indeed. Give me 1 second and I will just share the forward plan. Right. So, we'll have a cursory glance at November's. Not that that will affect this EAP in any way, shape or form, because the next EAP meeting isn't until the 15th of December. But just to give you an indication of how busy we are for November at Executive, we have, bearing in mind that this is the published forward plan, so there will be other items that aren't considered to be key decisions that will also be going to Exec in November that don't feature on this forward plan. I think it's going to be Lloyd's show, mostly November and December, because we've got a lot of finance items on. We've got the capital budget update, budget forecast as usual. The quarterly capital outturn report is coming back again. We've got a public spaces protection order on dog control, and then Lloyd again with the local council tax support scheme 24-25. The Northamptonshire local development scheme, East Northants local plan part 2 adoption. The Kettering Library roof replacement was due to go to November. 15 minutes after I published the forward plan, that got shunted to December, so that item is no longer going to this meeting, but December's instead. Procurement of independent living care and support provision. Then we've got household waste recycling centres and the plan for those from April 25 onwards. Specialist drug and alcohol treatment for rough sleepers or those at risk of rough sleeping. Corporate property leasehold policy. Half-yearly Treasury management update, and then a couple of late arrivals was the proposal to relocate Wilby Primary School to the Glenvale Park development in Wellingborough and social work degree apprenticeships. So yeah, we've got quite a busy November for Executive. I think there's at least, from memory, another couple. I think we've got 19 reports due to go. So yeah, very busy November. December, so bearing in mind that our meeting is on the 25th, sorry, not on the 25th, the 15th, these reports will be tabled on the 21st of December. I don't think there's anything jumping out that would fit this particular EAP. We've got the usual finance reports. There's also a couple of other finance reports due to go, which is the presentation of the draft budget. There's the business plan of Northamptonshire Children's Trust, asset acquisition policy, council-owned company governance arrangements, and an item on surplus asset disposal, culture, heritage and tourism business plan, and bookings for parks and open spaces. Obviously those being December, some of those items could slip, but I expect to see the majority of those there. And then January, again, the usual finance items, plus a replacement adult social care system coming forward, the return of the Kettering Leisure Village business case in January, Department for Transport funding allocations, adoption of the Corby LC whip, which only went last month for the consultation. And then we're on to February 24. So February 24, there's two meetings. The 8th of February meeting is the budget executive, where only budget related items will be discussed, and you can see the main ones there. And then on the 15th of February, we have a usual executive, which has only got the one item at the minute, but I expect plenty more by the time we get to February time. And that's your lot, Chair. As I say, there's nothing immediately jumping out that would fit this EAP amongst the items on that forward plan, which leads us neatly on to the next item where we are discussing the forward plan for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Can I reassure members that ChatGPT will not be brought into use an awful lot during that time, even though there's a lot of items for me. Any comments from members, or anything that members think that we should put on a list of items to be discussed at future EAPs of this group? If not, what I'd say is pick up the phone anytime or drop me an email if there's anything on there. One thing I forgot to mention during the item earlier, don't forget we have got our own member inquiry system in place, so we should be using that as well to actually feed inquiries through the system if people do have queries or problems. So we have that. Anything else that anybody wants to say before I close the meeting? No? Okay, with that, thank you very much for your time. I hope the weather's improving outside, and I'll see you again.